There's one thing I hate about giving advice, and that is that not all advice is applicable to every single person. To some people, I'll say, keep doing what you're doing, narrow down. And to other people, I'll say, maybe you should experiment more. Now, naturally, the further you get into development, the less you should perhaps experiment. You already have most of your stuff nailed down. Now, I took a look at Yestersoul by Neat Games, and it's a game that looks nice. I like it. But when seeing this game, there are aspects where I wished there had been some more experimentation going on. Not in terms of design. I think this aesthetics works in a lot of ways. And it looks like a polished game, and seems to be quite far into the development. So what do I mean by experimentation? Well, we're going to look at one frame, and it's this frame. But I think this frame exemplifies some of the problems that a lot of other scenes also has. Mind you, I say this as my personal opinion, but I do think that there's a small issue with it. So what's the problem? Well, suppose I take this frame, and I look at it. Now, I will already say that I think that the separation between the platforming area and the background is a bit undertuned. So suppose I do separate the platforming area and the background in my drawing software. Well, something kind of weird happens. If we just do that a little bit, now it looks, I think, a bit better. But suppose I go overboard with it. Now we get this weird effect, where we get this bright spot in the middle, and it's dark around the edges. So at first, I didn't actually understand what was happening. But I started looking at a few other frames, like this one, and then at this one. And I saw that it was consistent. And it's consistently around the character. So why is that happening? Well, most likely, we have a sprite attached to the character that sort of brightens the area around the character. This is good. Hollow Knight does it as well. But what I would say isn't good is to have this bright spot also affect the platforming area. Why? Well, it kind of washes out the platform. And we don't want to wash out the platforms. We only really want to increase the separation using this light. We can see this in Hollow Knight. It washes out the background, but the platforming area stays the same. And I can showcase the difference here. Here we have it washing out the platforms, and here we have it not washing out the platforms. I would say one looks better, but I can already show you what happens to this scene if we remove some of the effect of the bright light around the character. What happens is that we get this. It's a small difference, but I think there's an improvement, at least in readability. But I also think that it makes it look a bit better. Now I want to showcase something. When I increase the contrast to this scene in Have a Nice Death, we get this. It only highlights the platform. This is intentional by the developers. The artists want the brightest spot in the scene to be the platform. Now you don't have to be this extreme. This is an extreme case. But we generally shouldn't have this. There's no intentionality with what it brightens up. And instead we use contrast to highlight our platform to increase readability. So when we brighten this, I increase the contrast a bit, we get something like this. Now obviously, at this stage, we can play around with it. And this is what I mean with experimenting. So here, if I increase the contrast, it looks like this. Maybe we don't like this. Maybe it's too yellow. But maybe we like this. And now we come to the thing with separating the background. I think that this platforming area and the gray background makes the separation a bit too poor. And now we can just have fun. So what happens if I go for just an insane blue color? Well, then we get this. I don't necessarily like this, but it's different. Then we can go for an insane orange color. And well, I don't like this either. Here we have something more mellow. And maybe we don't want it to be in this sort of warm range or warm tone. Well, no problem. We can just go for a slightly colder tone. Or we go wild and go for something pinkish and orange color. I don't like this, but I would say if we land on something that is quite close to what you already have and then shift the background color just a little bit, we go from this original scene and to this with the changes I made. Obviously, a portion of this is a matter of taste. I don't think you should necessarily go for my taste, but I think the idea of having your bright lights wash out both the platforms and the background is generally ill-advised. Overall, I think you have a nice thing going on. Now, if you look at my approach in this situation, I haven't actually relied on color theory or skills. I have relied on experimentation. This is what I generally do when I start anything. This is especially true for colors and characters. I don't do one character and hope it works out. I do 20 or 10. I don't know how many I do, but I do some amount. And they're all done quickly, like in 5 minutes or less. And they're only done in order to get a sense for how I want my characters to look. Do I want them to be bigger and bulky, or do I want them to be smaller and cute? And you'll get a lot of bad results from this. Bad results are fine if you only spend 5 minutes getting bad results. But it's sort of like you're throwing everything at the wall and hoping that something sticks. This is the idea of being playful and experimenting. Because when you do this, you're sort of hedging your bets. Even if you suck, maybe you still have a 1 in 20 chance to make something that is kind of passable. Now, if you're wondering why I was talking about Yestersoul, it's because this was posted on my subreddit. You too can post here and get feedback, although it will probably generally be delayed because I'm not that quick at making videos. Next, we're going to look at Rogue Tanks. This game is actually released, because I didn't make this video fast enough, but I still think we can take a look at it. Now, I would generally say that this game sometimes could also benefit with a bit of experimentation in terms of color, or at least shifting the colors to all be a bit warmer instead of having this cold and warm mix. That's a small thing though. What I actually want to talk about is the idea of having the confidence enough to be playful. What do I mean when I say this? Well, there's a water box here, and it's really straight. Now, organic materials tend to not be straight, so generally, my advice is, if you make an artificial material, go as straight as you want. But if you want your material to feel organic, I think you should actually make a messed up line. So I'm just gonna mess up your line here, and we get the feeling that this is a bit more like water. It doesn't change the overall look, it still kind of looks the same. But now it looks more intentional. I intentionally made it messy because that's water and water is messy. We can see on the tanks that you can draw perfect lines. You do it here because it fits here, but you don't do it here because it doesn't fit here. And if we see that distinction and that difference, we assume that you did it intentionally, not because you suck at drawing. So it's important to have this kind of confidence, at least trust enough to experiment with it, because you learn a lot from it, because sometimes they actually work out. Now I'm gonna make 2 small nitpicks. The first, I don't think you should use Arial. So I'm just gonna show you with my poor handwriting, where I, instead of having armor written in Arial, have it written by myself. This isn't necessarily a good way to write armor, but the fact that I wrote armor like this and intended to write armor like this makes it seem like I care. I'm not lazy. I wanted it to have my shitty handwriting. It's supposed to look like this. It's a small difference, but I think it's an important difference. The last thing is just a small nitpick. I think it's important to not confuse materials and not change the vibe of the material. So when we have these stumps, or these logs, this is how we made our wood. And I think it's a decent choice. But this is now how our wood looks. So when we make this other thing here, also made of wood, I don't think we should change the vibe of what wood looks like. So if I just draw on top of this, just poorly drawn, something that almost looks like bacon, now that we get this slightly closer to wood material, it keeps our materials a bit more consistent, and thus our style a bit more consistent. I'm only nitpicking one scene here, and I think that you have a nice thing going on. Your gameplay looks nice as well. But I think this problem that I'm exemplifying with this scene so sort of happens at times in your other scenes, where it can be important just spend a few minutes and be more playful, have more fun. And when we're already in this stage, where we've gotten far with our art, can't change that much. We are kind of locked in. But it's still important to sort of check, I've gone for this. Does everything in my scene match this vibe? And I think a game that does this well is Squid Grid. This game has a really cute vibe going on, and I like it. Now I talked a bit with the creator, and he said that it needs to have a square look and a beige color in the background. He was going to upload to the subreddit, but I don't know if there's something weird going on sometimes with uploads where I actually can't see them. I've covered all the examples that I can see, but now we're talking about Squid Grid. And there's an element where I kind of don't want to give advice because I think it has a great thing going on. And it says that it has a square look and needs to have a square look. But I still want to mention some things. I think even if we need to have a square look going on, I still think it can be important to sort of make it slightly more playful around the edges. Maybe we make the grass pop out a bit more, and maybe we make the water have slightly more bubbles going on. Let's remove this harsh edge, because currently that's not what the style is going for. It doesn't have this entirely square and harsh edge. If we're making this choice 90% of the time, we probably should make it 100% of the time. Now this advice does seem problematic, given that this game actually needs to have a square look. So can we do this? Well, frankly, I don't know. I would say that if we need to have a square look in order to maintain and see the grid, I think that we should probably just add a grid. Just a tiny one to sort of see where each square is. And that also affords us the opportunity to be more playful with the art. Now we have this one section which is readability for the sake of gameplay, and then the other things that are just there for more of a artistic vision. But I think overall you have a really good thing going on. I'm still going to say one thing, and I don't want you to take this as necessarily advice, because this is borderline just my taste. But I think that there's something messed up going around in our head when we have this water edge and then the scene in the middle. And then the water seems to mostly be there just for the sake of vibes. But it makes it look a bit like a screensaver. So I want to just show you what happens if we just push the scene in a little bit like this. And we had a frame around the grid board. Now we have our play section in the middle, and we have also framed our water on the sides. Now because we frame it, it still kind of looks like we have a screensaver thing on the sides. But the fact that we frame each element and separate them makes it slightly easier to digest each element separately. The problem with the solution is that it has sort of a 90s vibe with big HUDs, and a lot of people don't like that. So I don't think you necessarily should go for this. This is what I say. It's not necessarily advice. I don't necessarily think that big HUDs are bad, but some people do. But the thing that the frame affords us is that if we need to have a scorecard or an exit menu or anything, now since we have this frame and this separation, we can actually use this water here to sort of have a drop-down menu of sorts, or a drop-down score, and sort of integrate it and add how many signs I want. Now, since we have framed each element, they don't interrupt each other as much. But as I said, this is kind of not advice. I would still be careful with having these hard shifts. The rest of our style isn't sending that message. I don't know exactly what the best solution is, but I feel like there is a solution to this problem if you play around with it a bit. And think about, why do I need to have a square look? And how can I solve the problem I'm having, but still sort of get the most of my art and my style, which I like. This is close to what I like. I like this goofy style. Anyway, feel free to check any of these games out. Jester Soul, Rogue Tanks, Squid Grid. And sorry for the late video. I have been trying to improve my workflow with all of this, and hopefully that means a more consistent schedule. If you want to submit, you can do it on Nonsensical 2D. As I said, as of now, I don't think I have any submissions that I haven't covered. If you want to support me on Patreon, that would be awesome. I release unscripted videos there. Oh, and if you're wondering why I switched shirts, this video was a pain to make. And now I'm sick. Hopefully it's okay. Thanks for watching. Bye.